In recent weeks, global attention has once again shifted to the Ukraine-Russia war, not because of events on the battlefield, but because of an unexpected surge in U.S.-led diplomatic activity. President Donald Trump revived his controversial no-cards remark, insisting that the best moment for a peace deal was missed back when he met President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office on February 28. Since then, Washington has pushed forward a 28-point peace plan, criticized for being overly favorable to Moscow, triggering a wave of negotiations from Geneva to Miami and even shuttle diplomacy to the Kremlin. With Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner meeting both Ukrainian and Russian officials, and another round of talks set in Miami on December 4, the world now faces a rare moment, a fragile, uncertain, yet very real opening to end the war. And in this analysis, we will break down what Trump meant, why the negotiations are so tense, and what these movements reveal about the geopolitical game now unfolding behind closed doors. When President Donald Trump revisited his now famous no-cards remark, he was doing far more than recalling a tense exchange with President Volodymyr Zelensky on February 28. He was reframing the entire diplomatic timeline of the Ukraine-Russia war. According to Trump, the moment he confronted Zelensky in the Oval Office, telling him that Ukraine had no cards, was precisely the moment when both sides still possessed enough political space, international leverage, and battlefield uncertainty to strike a deal. That claim has drawn criticism, but it also forces us to confront a difficult truth: early in any conflict, before positions harden and casualties accumulate, opportunities for negotiation tend to be more flexible. And on that February day, the signals emerging from Washington indicated frustration, hesitation, and a belief, however controversial, that Ukraine would soon face constraints it could not escape. The meeting itself, ending earlier than planned, revealed a deeper disconnect. Zelensky bristled at Trump's phrasing, responding, "I didn't come here to play cards," but the metaphor mattered. For Trump, cards were not about poker, but about leverage. He was arguing that neither Ukraine nor Russia possessed a decisive advantage, and in his view, this equilibrium created the perfect moment for a settlement. Seen from a strictly diplomatic lens, Trump was identifying a rare window, a moment when both sides still had something to lose and something to gain. But from Ukraine's perspective, accepting such logic would have meant conceding its vulnerability in front of its most important security partner, effectively negotiating from a defensive crouch before the world. By March, Trump expanded the metaphor further, telling Forbes that nobody, not Ukraine, not Russia, had the maps, a phrase he used to emphasize the absence of clear, attainable end goals. His conclusion was blunt: if neither side could win outright, then a deal must be made to stop the killing. Whether one agrees with this assessment or not, his comment reflected a worldview shaped less by idealism and more by transactional realism, a belief that wars without winning conditions should be frozen quickly, even if the resulting peace is imperfect. Yet this raises a deeper political question: was this truly the best time to settle, or simply the moment most convenient for Trump's strategic vision? Critics argue that Trump's framing ignores Ukraine's moral position, its sovereignty, and its right to reject territorial concessions. Supporters counter that long wars often become harder to resolve, and Trump was warning that the longer the conflict dragged on, the narrower Kiev's diplomatic runway would become. What is undeniable is that the missed window, as Trump portrays it, now shapes everything that followed: the controversial 28-point U.S. peace plan introduced in November, the outraged reaction from Kiev and Europe, the emergency revisions in Geneva and Miami, and the extraordinary decision to send Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to Moscow on December 2 to speak directly with Vladimir Putin. Each of these developments stems from the same underlying assumption, that the war has reached a costly stalemate, and that diplomatic pressure, especially from Washington, is the only tool that can break it. In this sense, Trump's remarks are not simply a critique of the past, they are a justification for the diplomatic offensive now underway. And whether one agrees or disagrees with his interpretation, the fact remains that this early Oval Office encounter, tense, abbreviated, and widely seen as unsuccessful for Ukraine, has become the foundation for the negotiations unfolding today. If Trump's no-cards remark helped frame the missed opportunity, the real geopolitical shockwave arrived in November, when Washington quietly presented Kiev with a 28-point peace plan. This document, drafted with input from both the United States and Russia, and claimed by Trump's team to be coordinated with Ukraine, landed like a diplomatic earthquake. For many in Kyiv and across Europe, it was not a roadmap to peace but a roadmap to concession. Territorial losses, restrictions on Ukraine's army, a veto on NATO membership, and a ban on long-range weapons were among the most contentious provisions. In essence, the plan appeared to codify many of the conditions Moscow had long demanded, raising immediate fears that the United States was pressuring Ukraine into accepting a settlement shaped primarily by Russian interests. Kyiv's reaction was swift and heated. European capitals were equally alarmed, interpreting the proposal as a sign that Washington, or at least Trump's circle, was shifting away from the collective Western position that any peace must respect Ukraine's sovereignty. Within days, emergency negotiations were scheduled. On November 23 and again on November 30, Ukrainian and U.S. delegations met in Geneva, joined by European representatives. The mission was clear: strip the plan of its most damaging clauses and rebuild a framework that Kyiv could realistically accept. Media reports suggested that the document was reduced from 28 points to 19, with softer language and fewer unilateral burdens placed on Ukraine. The process was messy, tense, and politically sensitive. Geneva marked a turning point. For the first time, the U.S. delegation listened not only to Ukraine's objections but to Europe's mounting frustration that peace talks were being shaped without sufficient allied input. After the Geneva revisions, the Ukrainian delegation, led by National Security and Defense Council Secretary Rustem Umerov, flew to Florida for further discussions. President Zelensky did not attend but later described the dialogue as constructive, emphasizing that Ukraine's voice had finally been heard and listened to. For Ukrainian leadership, being heard was not a diplomatic courtesy, it was a matter of national survival. But the story did not end in Florida. In a move that stunned many observers, Trump dispatched his special envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner to Moscow on December 2. The pair met with Russian President Vladimir Putin, engaging directly on the revised peace plan. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov later said no compromises had yet been reached, but confirmed that Washington had provided 4 additional documents related to ending the war. This detail alone suggests something larger. The U.S. was not presenting one isolated plan, but an entire portfolio of potential settlement structures, an unusual but telling sign of how urgently Washington wants movement. Western media quickly interpreted Ushakov's comments as evidence that Putin had rejected the plan. But the Kremlin, through spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, immediately pushed back, insisting that no such rejection had occurred. Meanwhile, Witkoff and Kushner briefed Trump, who said the talks were quite good and that they left Moscow with the impression that Putin wants to end the war. Whether this reflects genuine Russian intent or simply diplomatic posture remains unclear, but it does indicate that both sides are probing for openings. Behind all these meetings lies a larger political reality. The United States is now engaging in shuttle diplomacy on a scale rarely seen in this war, shuttling between Kyiv, Geneva, Miami, and Moscow within a span of just days. Whatever one thinks of Trump's approach, whether it appears bold, naive, or dangerously transactional, it is undeniably active. After months of stalemate on the battlefield and growing fatigue within the West, Washington is now attempting to seize what it believes is a fleeting diplomatic window. In this context, the peace plan controversy is not just about content. It is about who shapes the endgame of the war. Europe insists that its security interests must be respected. Ukraine demands sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia seeks guarantees that satisfy its strategic ambitions. And the U.S., under Trump, appears determined to centralize negotiations, even if it means disrupting partner expectations. This is the new diplomatic landscape, crowded, pressured, and dominated by the sense that a rare opportunity, fragile, unpredictable, but real, may be emerging. And as the shuttle diplomacy intensifies, the stakes only grow higher.